Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Ellen Meredith, who's here to share with us her new book, Your Body Will Show You the Way. Energy Medicine for Personal and Global Change. So welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you, Marianne. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, it's such a joy to spend time with you again and to talk about your new book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, we've been going through quite a bit lately, I think both individually and collectively here on the planet Earth. And I wanted to address the fact that we're going through so much change. And I wanted to pose the question of if things are changing, and I think they're changing really radically, not just in details, how can we evolve our bodies and our instruments to not just survive this change or handle it or react to it, but how can we actually be able to navigate change and thrive within it? So that was the task I set myself, and it was really a fun experience to explore all of this in terms of what can we do with our energies to embody change.
Well, and before we get too far down the road, I'd love for you to share with our listeners the languages that our bodies speak.
Okay. Yeah. Well, basically, I believe that the body speaks the language of energy. But really, in fact, the body has two different communication systems. It has the chemical communications that we use in Western medicine. You go in and get a blood test and they see what your chemistry is doing. And then they give you a chemical, usually a medication of some sort that's meant to alter that chemical communication. But underlying the chemistry, the body communicates, body, mind, and spirit, all three, constantly communicate with each other using energy communications. And so that's the language your body speaks, and it's more of a language than it is a science project. So we can participate in our body's energy communications in a way we can't participate in our body's chemical communications.
And that way we can get answers. But I think a lot of times people are waiting for that answer like, yes, do this, or no, don't do that,
Right. And, I think that we need to evolve our understanding of what guidance is, because we're in a very right answer culture that's, asks yes, no questions. Is it this or is it that? And we want the right answer and we want it right now. And if we can learn to enter into dialogue with our own being, an ongoing conversation, like you do when you're getting to know someone, we can go deeper and deeper and get more information. And it doesn't come just as an answer in English in our heads. In fact, the whole body is built as a guidance system, as a communication system. And when we can tune into the communications that are happening there, we've got access to all kinds of information, and not just about our own personal health, but also even the health of the planet. I mean, we're a lot more like bees and porpoises than we know, in that we really do have a swarm or collective consciousness that we can access through this guidance system built into the body.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that because I'd love for you to dive into how this works. I mean, because your subtitle really kind of drew my attention, because energy medicine for personal change, I was like, okay, I got that. But for global change, so how those two connect?
Each of us is creating our own life in every moment. I mean, we make choices and decisions, and they affect everyone. And there's two different kinds ways that energy affects things. One is direct, cause and effect. I do this, and this happens over here. I push you and you fall over. That's cause and effect. But there's another principle of energy, which is called resonance, where if you resonate a certain note, it can cause something else to vibrate or resonate at that note, even if it doesn't hear you. You can influence energy at a distance that way. And if that seems a little too abstract, just think about how different moods will sweep a nation. And there's lots of factors that create those moods, but they do influence us, just like the weather influences us, not just directly, but kind of through the environment of it all. So how do we affect global change by shifting our consciousness, starting with us, but that has a ripple effect and it creates a more global awareness, across the board.
So, in your book, you talk about how we can learn to tap into this communication through our energetic exchange to our
Uh-huh.
own subtle energies that will be able to get to this place where we can heal. So, how does that come together?
Okay, well, your body speaks through symptoms and it gives you signals about what it needs every moment. And what we've learned in our culture is we've learned to ask what's wrong and how can I fix it? So we get lots of information about what's wrong, but we're missing the signals of what's needed. What could I cultivate in this moment? How can I respond to this communication that's coming from my body other than trying to kill the messenger, get rid of the symptom? So part of this technique, which I call energy dialogue, is using the language of energy to speak with energy, to communicate with our own body. And what that means is that in any moment, we tune in to what we feel, what we see, what we can hear, what we can smell, using all our senses and our extended senses, such as direct knowing or sense of a shift. We have a lot of instincts that we don't think of as senses, but they really are. If we use those to tune in to what's happening within our body, and the mind expresses itself through the body as well. If we can tune in and then respond appropriately, we start to build relationship and it shifts our health. First of all, when the body feels heard, it stops screaming at us. And often, say you have a stomach ache, you can put your hand on your stomach. Just don't just tune in with your brain. Use your whole instrument. So put your hand on your stomach and let your hand both speak to your stomach and listen to, well, what does your stomach need in that moment? What is your body asking for in this moment? And let little answers come to you. And usually we want the big picture. We want the whole answer to, oh, this is about my mother-in-law, or this is because of X, Y, or Z. And instead, it might say, I want you to slowly sip water, or I want to breathe in slowly and then breathe out even more. Breathe in on a count of 3, and then I want to breathe out on a count of 4. Or it might say, actually, you've got your hand here, but I want your other hand to go here beside your face. And if we can get to that level of guidance with our body, where we are kind of having a little faith that it can show us some things about what it needs, we start to really move and shift the energy dynamic that's creating the illness. And then we can heal. And I want to make another point related to this, which is in our culture, we're very used to objectifying everything. We think the objective truth is truer than the subjective truth. So when we have symptoms, we go to the doctor, we get a diagnosis. So say you've got your bowels irritable, you've got some kind of irritable bowel thing going on. You go to the doctor and you're told, oh, you have Crohn's disease. And then you look it up on the internet to find out what Crohn's disease is. And you've objectified it. It's now a thing, and you're treating this thing that you're reading about out there. And you're no longer in conversation with the dynamic of energetic and physical forces that are happening in your body. So by going outside ourselves and objectifying everything, we lose access to this direct language that we can have with our own creation of self, with the dynamics that are in here. And you can take 20 people with Crohn's disease, and it's a very different dynamic in each person. So we're not doing ourselves a favor by turning our individual situation into some kind of generic that we then treat.
It seems like we're in a society. I mean, doctors are great. I think everyone should see their doctor. It seems that, something goes on and we need a pill for it. And, there's got to be other ways to address different issues that come up.
Right. And what's so funny about that, to me anyway, is that people say, oh, I don't believe in energy or energy medicine, or how can that work? But we have that leap of faith that that little white pill that someone gives us is going to change how our body functions.
It seems that something goes on and we need a pill for it. And, there's got to be other ways to address different issues that come up.
Right. And you know what's so funny about that, to me anyway, is that people say, oh, I don't believe in energy or energy medicine, or how can that work? But we have that leap of faith that that little white pill that someone gives us is going to change how our body functions. And it's just our culture that has socialized us to believe that chemistry can change us, but that energetic, I don't want to call them interventions, energetic conversations can absolutely change everything. And if you think about a time when you've been sitting in your house and you're feeling really horrible, maybe you feel like you've got the flu coming on, you just feel terrible, and then the phone rings and it's your best friend from high school who you haven't talked to for a while, your whole energy can shift. All this joy floods in, and your energy level rises and you stop aching. And at the end of that call, maybe you don't feel sick anymore. We've all had those kinds of experiences, but we're taught to tune those out as irrelevant, but to believe that when we take the pill and then feel better the next day, that's relevant. And I'm not saying it's not relevant, but one of the problems is when you can change your chemistry, sometimes you can cure the symptoms or cure the disease, but true healing that goes at what causes the problem in the first place, I really feel requires that we look at our energies and what this situation is trying to communicate to us. Our life has meaning. It's not just a scientific formulation of do this and then this happens. We're working with creating a map of meaning. And whenever we have some kind of illness or dis-ease or things go wrong in our relationship or at work, it's telling us something about the interplay of energies and the map of meaning that we're trying to create.
And it's interesting. A lot of people here are very spiritual and believe in spirituality, but when it comes to how the body and the energy of the body is, it seems that there's this disconnect from the physical and the spiritual in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's culture wide, right? Body is a different thing from mind, is a different thing from spirit. And if you just reframe that and say, body, mind, and spirit are part of a spectrum of existence where your body is quite physical, your mind is less physical, and your spirit is even less physical, but they're all connected. They're all part of the same consciousness or same being. Then you begin to see that, oh, I can work on different dimensions of this spectrum and influence the whole. And too often our spirituality, we sit on the cushion and we do these wonderful practices, which I totally love, but the body doesn't get the memo. So what I'm interested in is something that I think of as embodied spirituality, how to work with your instrument, how to tune this instrument to play the music of your soul. And of course, in order to play the music of your soul well, you're also working with the musician, the person playing the instrument. So you've got the instrument and you've got the musician that both need to have ongoing dialogue with the energy of the soul to understand how to evolve in alignment as a committee of three. I like to think of us as a committee of three, the body, mind, and spirit. And so a lot of times people have a very profound spiritual practice, and it makes them want to avoid everyday life because everyday life is too gross and it feels disconnected to them. And they aren't maybe learning how to connect their spirituality moment by moment with going to the grocery store or everything else we do in our lives, paying our taxes, whatever we have to do to be in body here. There's a disconnect. So I think one of the greatest spiritual tools is connection. And I think that that's also one of the greatest healing tools that my teachers always said, my inner teachers who trained me always said, if you don't know what to do, like if you're just lost or hurting too much, you don't know what to do, just connect in. And you're going to set up the circuits that can provide the change, that can provide the healing. I think that's what spiritual people need to do, is to understand that this is an instrument that they're playing. And take that challenge on of how do I inspirit this living mind-body combination that I'm walking around inside.
I'd love for you to share with us your background. I found it so fascinating. How did you become this highly regarded medical intuitive?
Okay, well, I've been doing this medical intuitive work for almost 40 years now, but it started about 50 years ago when my grandmother, who was dead, approached me in my mind. I'm a writer, and I'd finished a novel, and I was sitting around, looking for inspiration, and Grandma showed up with a message for me, which I wrote down. And I thought, oh, how nice, my imagination supplied Grandma, because I didn't have any belief systems around spiritual stuff at that point. And I didn't think anything of it, but later that day, someone came to my door who I barely knew and said, hey, I'm going to a psychic fair. Do you want to go with me? And I said, oh, sure. And I went, and the psychic, it was one of those $10 psychic readings, but the psychic looked at me and she said, your maternal grandmother is standing right behind you, and she has a message for you. And then she repeated the message word for word that I had written down for my grandmother. And I was kind of dumbfounded. I said, well, actually, I was a brat. I said, I already got that message. Doesn't she have something else to say? But we both laughed, and she said, it's my belief that your grandmother is actually, because I said, is this, are you reading my mind? What's going on? And she said, no, it's my belief your grandmother's standing behind you, and she is speaking, and that you're getting lots of messages. And if you slow down and listen, you can learn from them. And so the next day I was kind of slowing down, still in my pajamas at 2:00 in the afternoon. And I noticed a ticker tape of letters in my head, kind of like an old stock market ticker tape. And I wrote the letters down. It was the first message from my councils, my inner teachers. And they trained me every day. I tuned in. And the training wasn't so much about channeling messages for the world, although there were plenty in there. It was training me to see things differently, to shift perspective, to perceive energies, to understand my life with the light of awareness. And it was sometimes quite dramatic. There were lots of coincidences and interesting spotlights thrown on situations that normally I wouldn't notice. And after some years of training, my teacher said, you're going to move to California. You're going to get very sick. And in the process of getting better, you're going to learn to be a healer. And in that whole speech, I heard, you're going to move to California. So I was really happy. But in fact, I did get very ill. And when I was working with a complementary practitioner that my doctor sent me to, I learned about meridians and sort of that there were systems for understanding what was going on inside the body. And I learned that I could see what was going on or perceive what was going on in my meridians, in my aura, in my chakras, all those systems. But I also learned that I could look at a wall of supplements and see which one I needed. So that was my training. It was on the job. When I got better, the practitioner invited me to come work in her office as a medical intuitive. And within a year, I had a full-time practice as a channel and healer and all of it. And I had to work with guidance because I didn't have the training yet to understand what I was doing. I had to just listen and listen to the person's body and their own energies and see what I saw for them, but then also listen to my own guidance as to what that person needed. And it was a very intensive training. I've worked with over 10,000 people, and I've learned from each of them more about how amazing energies are, how amazing each of us is. And we're each different, we're each unique. And so I think I could study my whole life, or maybe many lifetimes, and still not learn it all. It's such a rich way of understanding being alive.
What I'm excited about is for those who maybe aren't intuitives or haven't done energy healing, they can pick up your book and it gives them a place to start. So it's not like you have to be highly gifted in order to get started.
Right. That was my goal. I've written 2 books in this series. Well, 3 actually. The older book is called Listening In, and the middle book was called The Language Your Body Speaks. But my goal was to take everything that I have learned over the years from my work with clients and from the councils and put it in a form that's accessible to anyone. Because I believe this isn't a special gift. I believe we all have the ability to learn the language of energy, and it's built into us like the ability to learn English or French or German or Chinese. And that, like a language, like with learning English, we didn't come out of the womb speaking fluently. We learned it because our environment helped us learn it, taught it to us. And we didn't get that with the language of energy. Our environment taught us to tune it out, because most infants do perceive and speak energy, but it gets tuned out the way, like when a little kid babbles, when we start out as infants, we babble sounds from every language, apparently, and yet most of us can't pronounce a lot of sounds now because the ones that aren't reinforced get filtered out. And I think that's what happened to all of us, that we filtered out our awareness of this guidance system that's in every fiber of our being. But I don't think we filtered it out very effectively. I think it's pretty easy to reanimate it. And so that's what my book is really focused on, is not just what we should do, but how do you do this stuff? What can you do? How can you play with this and find your ability to speak energy again and influence your creation of self?
In your book, you say, I see my body as a doorway to the infinite and to all the places my mind and spirit can inhabit. And it just says the totality. I mean, we're really infinite beings. I love how you bring that together.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe it. And I also believe, I'm pretty sure we do not take our resumes with us when we die. So I think that the whole purpose of being alive isn't to build up the resume and get the validation from other people. It is about living a very rich experience and enriching the soul in the process. If you see it that way, it's kind of like going to Disney World. I mean, we're here to have some fun, to play with the potential and to celebrate being alive and our humanity and the diversity of people. I mean, when we go to the zoo, we don't ask all the animals to look alike, and yet there's some notion in our culture that a human being is a generic thing that can be defined by other people and that we have to conform to it. But I think that's off. I really think, when I look at people energetically, the energies that feed each of us are very different. They're not identical. Each of us has very individualized spiritual feeds. And that means that each of us is developing an instrument to do justice to that, and that we're going to have an orchestra with all different instruments in it, not just, 27 cellos. So that's sort of the philosophy, the jumping off point for saying, well, if we are trying to reclaim our authorship in this life, what does that entail?
I love that question. It really has one thinking. It's like, okay, how am I the author of my life?
Yeah, and one thing, I have a chapter in the book that I call Rename, Reframe, and Reclaim. Because I've really found over the years with all my work with clients and just in general, that names carry a lot of baggage. If you go to the doctor and you're told that you have cancer, all of a sudden, most of us freak out because we carry so many associations with the word cancer, even though there's tons of different kinds of cancers, and it doesn't say much about what the dynamic is for me if I'm given that diagnosis. So with illness, but also with situations like going through a divorce, there's every flavor of divorce on the planet, but the word divorce carries so much baggage. So I suggest that what we do is we ask the situation for a fresh name. What do I call you? What's a name for you? And we can do this little exercise together if you want.
I think that's a great idea.
Think about, you have an illness you have, whether it's diagnosed or not, or maybe a situation in your relationship or family or in your work, and ask it, what can I call you? Now, you're not assigning a name, you're asking it to tell you a name. And the trick is, it can be something stupid. It can be Fred, it can be butt thump. It can be something that just pops into your head, makes no sense. But it's good to kind of grab that name at first and work with it, because often as we unpack it, it has more meaning. So say it says, okay, you've been diagnosed with an ulcer in your stomach. And instead of calling it ulcer, it says, well, call me Fred. Okay, Fred, now you want to start dialoguing. What can I do for you? What can you show me about yourself? Tell me a little about yourself. How can I get to know you better? Hey, you want to go for a walk around the body and tell me what you think? You can get into dialogue with Fred and let Fred show you bit by bit who he is, how he operates, what he is to you, and you build a relationship. So instead of trying to get rid of the ulcer, you're trying to get to know who and what Fred is. And like getting to know someone, we don't jump right in and say, tell me the deepest secret of your deepest truth. I want to know everything in one concise sentence right now. We go back and forth. And because we don't tend to do that with our illness, we just say, go away, go away, go away, go away. We don't develop a very good relationship with our illness or with our separation process from our partner or these other things that we've named. And so the new name gives it a new frame. You can reframe it. For example, if you say about a divorce, my husband didn't want to be in the marriage anymore, so he dumped me. Well, that puts you right in the victim seat, right? I was dumped. If you have a big rash all over your face and you say, well, now I've got the plague, that's really funny. But telling yourself you have the plague brings in all kinds of associations that don't allow us to move the energies and shift it and heal. If you say, wow, my face has erupted with some kind of reactivity, I need to learn what it's reacting to and how I can support it, you've got something to work with. If you can say, my husband decided he needed to move on, so now I'm exploring my needs to move on, you've got something you can work with energetically. So that's the reframe, putting something in a framework that allows you to actually influence it, work with it energetically. And then the reclaim is reclaiming your experience as your own. What I said, reclaiming your authorship rather than this phenomenon out there that's been documented by researchers and nailed down into a thing. You're reclaiming this as just my experience. And Fred may be the biggest teacher in the world. Rather than something attacking me, rather than something going wrong, Fred may be here to be my teacher. And when I can reframe it as, wow, Fred, you're my messenger, or you're my teacher, what can I learn from you? Maybe Fred's your tour guide. Totally transforms what you do, how you do it, what your energy is around the whole situation. And ironically, often it leads to quite rapid healing. Because once the body's communications feel heard, the part of the body that's communicating, when it feels heard, it stops screaming, right? Like a little kid, mommy, mommy, mommy. It stops that when you turn around and pick the child up and hug her and say, hey, honey, what's going on? What can I do for you?
I love that. I love that. And I love in how your book, you talk about to treat our story as a map of meaning. I found that so impactful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really believe that we are here to create meaning. I mean, it's not to put check marks on a checklist or anything like that, but to live a meaningful life. And so if we see the body as the map of meaning that we create, it's more fun to live, and it's even more fun to get sick and have illness because you're saying, "Well, can I learn from you? What are you here to?" You get curious, and it takes you somewhere. And I think that's the difference between the energy that is electricity that we plug our computers into. That doesn't necessarily have meaning attached. But our subtle energies have consciousness, they have intelligence. So, absolutely, the energies that make us up are a map of meaning. And when we understand that, we get out of our head and the learned, socially assigned meaning that's been trained into the brain, and we discover what being alive really means to us personally. And then ironically, when we go inward and activate the inner guidance, we have access to the collective wisdom, much stronger than even Googling.
I love that. It's pretty cool. So we get to this place where we're working on healing our body, and everyone's got something,
Yeah.
an elbow, over. And I know right now a lot of people are dealing with heavy weight because of, coming out of COVID.
Yes.
So once we start getting this into alignment, how does this impact the planet?
Well, I think that as we shift from the focus on what's wrong and how do we fix it to the question of how do I cultivate wellness? Because healing isn't just about fixing the weight problem or fixing the chronic illness that 60% of Americans have. It is about learning to cultivate wellness instead. to figure out what this body needs in order to thrive moment by moment, then when we shift that paradigm, it has a ripple effect. It's like the dominoes. And the more people who think in terms of how do I cultivate well-being, how do I live in a sustainable way? I mean, if you think about when I say the word sustainable right now, a lot of people click into it and say, "Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Living more is energy efficiently, paying attention to the planet, living in harmony with nature." It makes sense. 30 years ago, maybe if you'd said the word sustainable, it wouldn't have made much sense at all. These things kind of ripple out and take on critical mass. And it can't take on critical mass if I'm not participating. If you're not participating, well, maybe if other people do, we'll be influenced positively by their work. But why not choose wellness? Why not choose harmony and cooperation and processes that are sustainable for ourselves as individuals, for ourselves collectively, and for the planet? And I kind of feel like the planet is forcing our hand right now. Mother Earth is demanding that we wake up and shift this paradigm, shift this perspective, because we're killing her with our objectivity, where we objectify the planet, we objectify bodies, where the power dynamics are very outside in and top down. That kind of thinking makes everything into a binary struggle between left and right and blue and red and light and dark. When we see everything as polarized into opposites, everything becomes a power struggle. When we can transcend, and I do talk about this in the book of how I believe we are in the sea change of consciousness, where we are moving from this either or thinking, this very us-them binary thinking, into what I call spherical consciousness, which is a both and, or awareness of multiple realities. And if you think about it, in our common culture, if I said what's the opposite of dark, you would say probably light. We think of light and dark as opposite. But in fact, if you put them on the circle of the day, or where the sun goes from dark, dark, dark to light, 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 or the moon, it's a whole circle with everything between light and dark on that circle. And those are just 2 points, light and dark, on a whole circle. And if you take that circle and spin it so it becomes a globe, you realize that, yeah, it's dark in the US while it's light in Australia, and everything in between in other parts of the planet. That's global consciousness, or spherical consciousness, where you can be aware that multiple realities exist and there are multiple points of view exist depending on where you stand on that sphere, depending on your context. So out of that spherical thinking, you become aware, if I throw my garbage out the window, I'm trashing my environment. And so I don't necessarily have the freedom to throw my garbage out the window unless I go pick it up right away, because I am trashing the environment for all of us. And we get that awareness that what we do affects the planet, and it spreads energetically through both influence and resonance.
It's amazing how we're all connected in so many ways. In your book, you have a chapter called Enter the Stream. And I would love for you to share on that, because I think this is a great place to bring this in.
Entering the stream is something that I learned from one of my inner teachers when I was working on someone one day. Normally, my teachers appear as collective consciousness. I call them councils, and they feel like groups. And I don't get into personalities a whole lot with them because they're spirits, and I just don't think they're in body and in a particular identity right now. So, but one day I looked up, and there was this old Chinese gentleman spirit standing in my practice room. And I mean, he was a stereotypical old Chinese gentleman with a long, thin beard and a long gown. And I was just chuckling, going, well, who the heck is that? And he held up a gold needle and handed it to me. It was imaginary. And he said, put the gold needle there. And a point lit up on my client. And he handed me a silver needle and said, put it there. So I put it where it indicated, it lit up on the client. And all of a sudden the client said, are you doing acupuncture on me? And I was kind of blown away. I said, why do you ask? And she said, because it feels just like when I met the acupuncturist. So I was intrigued, and this old Chinese gentleman showed up to show me a lot about the streams, which were meridian streams in that case. And then one day he said, enter the stream. And I wasn't sure. I looked at him, and the stream lit up. He said, enter the stream. So I thought, okay, I'm going to jump in there. So I dropped my attention. I imagined jumping into the stream. I dropped down into it. And immediately I saw all kinds of things that needed to happen with that stream. I saw that there was a boulder blocking part of the flow that I could, get help moving. I called on the universal supply team to help me move it. I saw that there were trees dragging and altering the way the water flowed. I saw that the banks were falling apart, were kind of degenerating on one side of the stream. And I got a team over there to work on them. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And I was working on a client who was struggling with a cancer diagnosis, and her cancer went into remission within a week or two. And we both felt that it was the work in the stream that turned the tide, because she said, this work went so deep, I felt like you were rerouting, the stream of my existence. And so I've been experimenting and exploring that concept of when you enter an organ to work on it from inside, when you enter the meridians to work on them inside, or drop into the chakras or any energy systems, either the ones that have been formulated or ones you discover that I call healing spaces within you, you can make a much bigger difference on what I call the creation of self, on how the outcomes in the body. And it's like, if you want to change how your cake tastes, you don't do it after it's all cooked and iced and cut in pieces. You do it when you're making the recipe, right? And putting the ingredients in. That's when you can have the biggest influence on how your cake is going to come out. And I feel that with the body, we need to know, and not just the body, the emotions, the mind, all of us, we need to know how to enter the stream of our own being so we can support it and work with it and influence it as we are forming, rather than after where the form is already starting to rot on the counter.
That's such great advice. And I love how you approach that. Being able to get in there and look, and you have people, spirits that are helping you with this. So it's not all on you.
Right. And in the book, I think it's at least 18 guided visits where I take you to visit different energy streams or places where you can have an impact on your well-being and on your health and even on your illness and your life problems, and sort of walk you through a visit. And I have MP3 recordings available to download that you can sort of shut your eyes and follow along as well. Because I just really believe that once we get the travel bug of traveling into our own being, of exploring our own instrument more fully as a real full place and not just a brain on a pedestal, you get hooked. It's wonderful to be able to participate at that level, and the results can be amazing. Just amazing.
Well, you have so many great stories in your book. Is there one you'd like to share with us?
Oh gosh. Yeah, one story I can tell you is about a couple named Melanie and Jill, and they, during COVID, they took refuge from the city. They went out to a little sweet cottage they had in the rural part of Oregon, and they wanted to focus on connecting back into Mother Earth, and slowing down and taking advantage of the fact that the city was on lockdown, rather than struggling with lockdown and feeling limited by all the changes that it had brought to their life and work. In other words, they embraced change and said, let's embrace a lifestyle that is possible right now. And they were really deepening into it and having an idyllic kind of experience. And then wildfires came, and it just swept through their area of Oregon. And, they had to evacuate. It was very traumatizing. They went out with their dogs, and, they were very worried about what would happen with their cottage and their part of the world. And when they came back, their cottage was still standing, but the beautiful scenery, the beautiful landscapes that they had been so deepening into were destroyed by the fires. So they were living instead of in their idle, their lovely little cottage, they were living in the midst of a disaster area, a black sodden landscape that was really charred beyond recognition. And what they had to recognize is that they had to find ways within themselves to ground, because grounding in that landscape, even though I do recommend in my other book that we use landscape to ground, can be torn away in a minute by fires or floods or just circumstances that cause us to move away from that. And not all of us have the opportunity to move into an idyllic little cottage in the country when we're on lockdown. We're still trying to make a living or figure out how to keep things going in our life. So learning how to ground and center is important. And I have 2 chapters that address this notion of grounding. And most people think of grounding as, putting roots in the earth. And I break it down into actually 4 different aspects of energy. When you think about a grounding wire, it wicks excess energy off so that it doesn't back up and electrocute you. And so we need to know, how do I get rid of excess energy? How do I wick off the things that don't serve me rather than having them accumulate and back up in my system? That's an important part of grounding. Another part is sending the roots down, but the point of sending roots down is getting nourishment. So what is nourishment, and how do I nourish myself? And I give energy medicine for each of these things of how we can bring energetic nourishment into our body, mind, and spirit. And then another aspect of grounding and putting down roots is the roots anchor the plant so it doesn't, blow away in the wind. So when we've lost our anchors, say your anchor was your job or your marriage or your daily coffee, and then the doctor says no more coffee, or your marriage breaks up, or you lose your job, do we have the skill we need to anchor, to find healthy anchors, and to consciously anchor both within ourselves and in things that will not be torn from us? And when things are torn from us, can we re-anchor ourselves effectively? And then the 4th aspect of grounding is centering. And that's what Melanie and Jill had to learn, how to center their sustenance within, how to anchor and ground within themselves. And I teach a lot of, throughout the book, I teach exercises, energy medicine exercises that help you actually do these things. And I also offer sections that I call play with it, where you can explore and try on things for size and see what works for you. Create your own energy medicine.
Yes, you have so many great examples in here, and play with it. Or I just love it because it gives examples on things that we can start doing to implement today to kind of add change into our life.
Right. And I think that unless we try things on for size, if we just take all the information we get in as ideas and then try to apply it to our lives, that's getting our information outside in. That's someone else's version of truth. And it never fits right. It wasn't made for us. It was made for them. It was their understandings derived from their experience. And absolutely, I learn from other people. I learn from other people's experience all the time. But if I don't know how to create my own understandings, my own awareness, my own energy medicine, my own way of communicating with my body, then I'm just parroting things that don't have enough meaning to my body. I'm just saying what the doctor said to do. I'm saying what the person with the 7-point plan says to do in order to lose weight or in order to do such and such. And I may find when I tune in that what I thought was a need to lose weight was really a need to learn how to nourish myself moment by moment. And the weight is an example of all the moments I wasn't paying attention and I was trying to just console myself with food and not listening in a refined enough way. Or I may discover that the weight is insulation and I need to discover other ways to protect myself or clear my energies so I don't need to be quite so heavily insulated. So often when we set these external goals or goals that come from other people, we miss the vital connection we need in order to heal from the inside out. So this book is all about healing from the inside out, changing the world from the inside out, creating our life as we want to see it, not in using this image we're aiming for, but creating a journey that feels authentic to each of us individually.
I think that would be so helpful for people just to understand that there's more to it than take a pill, because you often hear people, especially, here we're coming to the beginning of a new year. Everyone seems to make these New Year's resolutions that fall by the wayside because it's just so overwhelming.
Right, right. And, if we can make different resolutions, and maybe not for the new year, make a new day resolution each day, say, what's one thing I want to invite myself to explore or attend to today? Just for today, can I listen to my stomach and see what it has to say? Or can I listen to my body and ask for images each time I feel like something's going on in my body? Can I just ask for an image to pop into my head to illuminate that? I want the illustrations today. Just for today, can I let a song form within me that's an expression of my truth? Just for today, can I, so again, not trying to change the outcome or the outer aspect or set a goal that is this thing I have to get to, but set the terms of the journey that make it fun to be there. We don't say I'm gonna go on a trip to China and I've got my list of 40 things I have to see and I'm gonna check them off and barely see them. No, we say I'm gonna go and have this experience. And yes, there's a framework there, but we have to be ready to change our plans. If a hurricane happens, maybe we're not going to stay in China. Maybe we're going to go somewhere safer to have the rest of our vacation. And there's more and more situations coming up that are asking us to navigate differently, to be more flexible, to not try to build our life as this really strong edifice that can't be moved, to stockpile money, to stockpile experiences, so that we'll feel safe. We need to learn how to feel safe within ourselves, just in navigating, and have our life be more of a vehicle that can be shifted and moved and changed and even traded in for another vehicle as we need to. So I just feel like it's time. The times we're in are demanding us to live differently. But for many of us, it's in alignment of what our spirituality has been telling us for years anyway.
And your book is a roadmap to do that.
Well, I hope so. At least it's giving a lot of ideas of things you can try. And, I always invite people to change the exercises or change the practices to fit themselves. So with that proviso, yes, I tried to provide a roadmap, because too many people are out there saying, oh, you need to go inward, or, oh, you need to do this and that. And then the practices they give are just like, well, practice yoga for an hour every day or meditate. And those are wonderful practices if they work for you. But for the people who can't do yoga or can't meditate, that the practices don't really show you how to enact what it is you're being invited to try to enact.
Well, Ellen, I always love chatting with you. We have such a great time. I learned so much, and I'm so excited about your new book, Your Body Will Show You the Way. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Well, thank you, Marianne. My website is ellenmeredith.com, and that's meredith.com. And I also have a YouTube channel at Ellen Meredith. And so those are the best places. And then from my website, you can find all my books, and I have courses on DVD. I also teach on Shift Network, so you can look me up there. And I'm on Facebook. So anyway, you can find me out and about.
Well, Ellen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. I love it. I always love chatting with you. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ellen. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Your Body Will Show You the Way. So do you have a small business or book that you think should be on the radio, and the social media algorithms have changed so much that you just can't connect with your target market? Well, you're not alone. That's why so many people are choosing to advertise on radio. KMET is part of the 25th largest U.S. radio market in Southern California. The Moments with Marianne radio show is also available everywhere online after it airs on KMET, with over 800 episodes available, downloaded in over 78 countries. We're the #1 choice for advertising books and small businesses. So visit my website at mariannepastana.com for more information on how you can advertise on KMET AM/FM. Well, we're going to pause here for a quick moment. We'll be right back after these messages. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.